is the 1952 de Havilland Comet aircraft. It's the world's first jet airliner, and it entered into passenger service in 1952. It was developed in Britain, and it represented the dawning of a new age of air travel, a new era of modernism that would take us beyond the ship. The designer of the Comet had specifically wanted the aircraft to feel very luxurious compared to travelling by boat. So the aircraft was made to be very, very quiet, and it was very comfortable. It had a beautiful passenger cabin, as you can see here. But it also had these large square windows, rather than the more common circular porthole that you had in a ship. And the whole experience was about enjoying a meal, being on this new age of travel. Unfortunately, 2 years later, a Comet aircraft fell into the Mediterranean Sea and crashed, killing all 35 passengers. The wreckage was recovered and taken from the seabed and sent to the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough, where, along with an undamaged Comet, it was subjected to very extensive testing. And it was this testing that was very heavily reliant on the pilot's computer. So they stress tested all different aspects of the aircraft. And the pilot aids showed that as the plane took off and landed repeatedly, it expanded and contracted each time. And the aircraft was literally ripped apart at the corners of the windows, as these were subjected to very, very high stresses. So you can see here this piece that we show of the fuselage. This is in the Turing exhibition in London. This part was actually recovered, and you can literally see the rips at the corners where the metal fatigue had occurred. So Turing's computer had proved its power by literally saving people's lives. As well as being used for real world practical aspects, it was also used for scientific work. So in the 1950s, X-ray crystallographers were trying to uncover the structure of quantum chemistry by looking at the diffraction patterns that were produced when X-rays were passed through proteins. Scientists used Fourier transforms to analyse the data around the structure of the crystals, and again it was the pilot ACE that supported this work by doing much of the detailed computation. Of course, other machines were involved too, but the pilot ACE was really around and capable at the right time. The British chemist Dorothy Hodgkin, who developed pioneering work in this area, and she discovered the structure of insulin and also the vitamin B12. She actually donated this model of vitamin B12 to the museum, and it represents years of her work on X-ray crystallography, but also years of computation by machines such as the pilot ACE, which allowed her to crunch through the maths at very rapid speed. So the second area of Turing's work that I'd like to talk with you today is his work on cryptography during the Second World War. So Alan Turing was recruited from Cambridge to work at the top secret codebreaking establishment in Bletchley Park. Bletchley Park is north of London and was the site of the main decryption establishment, the Government Codes and Ciphers School, where secret messages were intercepted and ciphers were decrypted. The site consists of a mansion and a number of different huts, and each of the huts was responsible for decrypting different types of traffic, different types of messages. Hut 6, which is shown here, was responsible for the cryptanalysis of the Enigma, German Army and Air Force messages. And these were all encrypted by a 3-rotor Enigma machine. I'm very lucky that I have been given these images from, they've been cleared for use by the Government Communications Headquarters, who has recently allowed all of of these huts at the time to be more accessible to the public. So this is a three-rotor Enigma machine, and the operator would have set up the machine according to daily settings every day. He would have a code book which told him which rotors to use for the day, and then the initial settings for those rotors. And of course, you can choose 26 different settings for each rotor according to the 26 letters on those three metal rotors that you see. So the message was typed into the machine, and then each time a letter was entered, the rotor would move forward by one, staggered forward by one, meaning that no one letter was encoded at the same time in the same way. So the machine had 26 by 26 by 26 different variants, which allowed over 17,576 different outcomes. Then the signal is passed through the plugboard at the front of the machine, which you may see, which also transposes two letters over each other, offering yet another level of encryption. So the Enigma machine got even more complicated with this four-rotor machine, and this was added later in the war. The addition of a fourth rotor gave yet another level of security, so you don't have just the 26 by 26 by 26, but another 26 options, which gives nearly 500,000 different combinations just through the rotor settings. So Alan Turing worked in Hut 8 along with other colleagues, and it was here that they were responsible for the German naval Enigma machine and for de-encrypting the messages using from this four-rotor Enigma machine. The four-rotor machine encrypted very high-level traffic, so we're talking about the German U-boat traffic. And it was literally the U-boats that were stopping core supplies coming into Britain, like food and armaments. The Codebreakers at Bletchley Park developed a whole range of different devices for code breaking. Some very simple paper devices, such as this one, where you can literally see these the three rotors, the three wheels, being able to be moved up and down, allowing them to look at the various options for the different codes. And the Codebreakers would look for something called a crib, and this is quite literally a guess at the time, types of information that they were finding in the messages. So it might be any kind of extra intelligence that they could get on a particular message. It might be the name of the operator or their code name. It might be the weather that day. It could be the name of the ship, or literally the use of the word eins, one, which is the most common word in German in these messages. So any small piece of information like this might give them a way into breaking the code. This is actually my favourite object in the whole exhibition. And again, this was one that was on loan to us from the British Communication Headquarters, GCHQ. And it had never been on public display before. It's actually part of a typewriter, and it's adapted so that it could enable the Codebreakers to work through these different options, just to see if they could decipher the German words. And it shows how there's very painstaking mathematical work that comes down to just a literal process of searching for patterns through the German messages that they were looking at. Turing's major contribution to the war effort came through this electromechanical device called the bomb, and that's a bomb with an E, so bomba. The term came from an earlier device that had been developed in Poland, but Turing, alongside with his colleague Gordon Welshman, also from Cambridge University, they developed this design considerably. The bomb consisted of hundreds of wheels, as you can see here, and each would rotate to enable different wiring configurations. And that would be able to test each of the messages at very, very high speeds until they could find a possible match for that day's settings. And if they thought they had found a match, then they would test that on a smaller checking machine. These bombs were manufactured at very high numbers at a secret production line in Letchworth at a place called British Tabulating Machines, which is, here we have a picture, a company who had a long history of developing punch cards and electromechanical machines. But as you can see, it was really a big production line, so it wasn't just one or two of these machines made, there were literally hundreds made, and they were sent not just to Bletchley Park, but to a whole range of different outstations around the country. So just as much of code breaking and mathematical work at Bletchley was delivered by women, so much of the bomb production assembly line was also done by women. And the next image shows the use of the machines as they were actually used at Bletchley. This one's from East Coast, Mount Coast, and it showed something called Bombay Grease. So you can actually see in the image all of the different places it names in Greece. So each of the bombs were called after different places. So you have Larissa, Athens, Corinth, and each was attended by its own women operator, known as RENS, because they came from the Women's Royal Naval Air Force, Air Service, sorry. And the work at Bletchley Park is said to have shortened the war by over 2 years. That's a quote from a man called Harry Hinsley, but actually many think that maybe it didn't shorten the war, it actually, if we hadn't had this war effort, we may have simply lost, and lost very, very quickly. So without this effort and without these machines, we would have lost to the Axis powers of Germany, Italy and Japan. This next slide, and the next area that I'd like to talk about is Turing's work on artificial intelligence. And in order to understand this one, I think you need to look at some of the events that stimulated Turing's interest in this area. So I'm going to take you back to his time at Sherborne School, where he was a teenager. And at Sherborne, he became very good friends with another boy there called Christopher Morcom. Morcom was a very bright teenager, and again, he was also interested in mathematics and interested in science. And Turing wanted to impress Morcom, he wanted to improve himself. Later, Turing was to say that he simply worshipped the grounds that Christopher trod on. But much to Turing's horror, Christopher Morcom died very suddenly when he was just 18 from tuberculosis. And Alan Turing was absolutely devastated when this happened. His death acted as a catalyst for Turing as he began to think about the nature of mind and the body and intelligence. And Turing was later to write to Morcom's mother after Morcom's death about the nature of spirit, and he wrote this beautiful essay where he explores ideas around the body and intelligence and shows how they're linked. And in the essay he writes, "Personally, I think that the spirit is really eternally connected with matter, but certainly not always by the same kind of body. But when the body dies, the mechanism of the body holding the spirit is gone, and the spirit finds a new body sooner or later, perhaps immediately." So he really began to play with these ideas about how mind and spirit and body are connected, and moved into some quite fringe areas of science, like telepathy, which today we would consider not to be an area that a scientist would be naturally looking at. And these early ideas about the mind and body were taken forward by Turing's work around machine intelligence. So he wrote a paper in 1950 called Computing Machinery and Intelligence. And it's this paper where Turing addresses some of his first ideas around artificial intelligence. And he proposes an experiment called the imitation game, which is later known as the Turing test. Many of you in this room will probably have heard of this. It's one of his very famous contributions.